Welcome to the Christian Woman Leadership Podcast, where we hope to inspire you to embrace your God-given gifts, skills, and passions in order to lead with confidence. We want you to remember that you are fearfully and wonderfully made in the image of God, and you are fully loved by Him.
You have been designed on purpose by God with unique gifts and passions in order to love and lead those around you. I'm your host, Esther Littlefield, a pastor's wife, business owner, mom, and writer.
And I'm Esther's co-host, Holly Kane. I'm a wife, mom, and business owner. I also write at hollykane.org, where I focus on my passion for women's ministry.
Together, we chat about important issues that Christian women leaders face. In addition, we interview other women just like you who lead in various roles, from church to community to business. Through this podcast, we offer you encouragement, tools, and resources to help you on your leadership journey. We are so glad you're here with us. Welcome to episode 100 of the Christian Woman Leadership Podcast. Today, I am here with Holly, and we are celebrating our 100th episode. We are super excited to do this. And you know that during this month, we have been focused on the mental health series, but we are obviously taking a break from that for this episode for the purposes of having this fun celebration. And just as a precursor, if you're brand new here, this is going to just be a little bit of a different episode than normal. And also, Holly and I have already recorded an episode today, and then we have talked for about 45 minutes prior to this. And we are just hoping we can get through this conversation without just being completely silly. So, Yep. Just a little forewarning for you. So, but just for some context, we started the podcast in July of 2018. That was when we officially launched it. We really had no idea what was going to happen with it, right, Holly? I mean,
Absolutely.
We're just like following what we sensed God was calling us to do, and so many good things have come out of it. We have an amazing listenership. So those of you who listen, we are so thankful for you. We have a really fun Facebook group where a lot of you hang out, and our podcast has actually been downloaded over 150,000 times, which is mind-blowing.
That's so crazy.
And we're celebrating our 100th episode, which I don't know if either one of us ever thought we would make it that far.
I don't even know that I thought that far ahead.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
yeah.
We were just kind of like, well, let's just do this and jump in.
I feel like we should have had one of those cakes that, you see TV shows where they have the 100 episode cake.
Oh man.
We should have done that. I could have made it.
You could. Well, there's still time when you come to Maine. If you can ever, leave Florida, you can come to Maine and bring a cake.
Okay. So today we thought it would be fun to do something a little bit different. And really what we want to do is celebrate you, our listener, the Christian woman who is leading in ministry or business or your community or home, and the woman who perhaps is looking for some extra support in her leadership journey.
Yeah. And, maybe like me, you don't fall into one box per se. Like maybe you're not, I'm using just in quotes, but just a leader in your church or just a businesswoman or just a stay-at-home mom. But maybe you found yourself leading in a lot of different ways. And that's oftentimes what we end up doing. And the truth is that we face challenges that are different from those who are not in a leadership role or maybe don't have a leadership, I'm going to say, personality. So, or you might be a listener here who doesn't even consider herself a leader or maybe questions whether she's called to leadership. We know you're out there and we're so glad you're listening. So we want to take time today to celebrate and to thank you for being part of this community.
Yeah, so we asked over the past few weeks for you guys to send in audio clips if you wanted to tell us about how the podcast has impacted you. And we're so excited that so many of you have sent in clips to share with us. And I think you're really going to enjoy hearing other women's voices and how the show has made a difference to them. I know I'm excited to hear them.
Yeah. It's super fun. And, normally when we have a guest on the show, we just get to hear from one guest. So this today is going to be like several guests all in a row, just sharing little snippets. So the other thing I want to mention though, before we get to the audio clips and kind of chatting about them, is that we have a fun announcement that we're going to share at the end of the podcast. So make sure to stick around with us until the end. So
I'm very excited for our fun announcement.
Oh boy. Yes. It's going to be fun. So, so let's jump in with our first clip from one of our listeners, Kass Fogle.
Congratulations, Esther and Holly, on your 100th episode. Praise God for the wonder of technology and the gift of your messages, truly. This is Kass Fogle, and I run a blog and podcast called The Introverted Believer, but I felt the nudge and, quite frankly, the shove to head in a totally different direction. So when I prayed for guidance, I was led directly to your Christian Woman Leadership podcast. I landed on episode 82 as my first episode, and I was immediately hooked, like fangirl hooked, right? Esther, you shared your shift and got up close and personal about your business. And it was exactly what I needed to hear at the exact time I needed to hear it. Through the Christian Woman Leadership Podcast, I've been introduced to so many godly women, like Tembi Seacrest, for example, and listened to their strategies for success. And I'm so much closer than ever to making pivotal and confident changes in my own business. I know when I listen to the both of you, Esther and Holly, I am following a biblical leading toward making real changes that will drive results. Listeners, I'm so glad you found this podcast, and I pray it has the same impact on you spiritually and professionally as it did me. And again, congratulations to Esther and Holly.
Aw, fangirl Kass, that's so sweet. We love you.
Yeah, I remember when Kass emailed me or sent me a message on Facebook and called herself a fangirl, and it was so funny. I couldn't believe, like, what? Never really thought we would have like fangirls, but Kass is just a wonderful part of our community. She's part of my Confident Leader Catalyst program, and it's been so much fun to get to know her. So,
yeah, and I even got to be a guest on her podcast.
That's
so
right.
Go check that out.
Introverted Believer podcast.
Yes. Yeah.
And we'll have to link that up in the show notes. So
yeah.
Awesome. All right. Next up, we have a clip from Amanda.
Hi, Holly and Esther. Congratulations on 100 episodes of the Christian Women Leadership Podcast. As an author and speaker, a mom, and a pastor's wife, I know that I need my reserve continually filled because leadership can just naturally deplete us. And so I started seeking solid, biblical, and practical insight that would refuel me, and I found it in Christian Women Leadership Podcast. You guys have been a gift to me, and I sincerely thank you for faithfully fulfilling a need that we Christian women have. Here is to 100 more episodes, ladies. Congratulations.
Amanda, that was so amazing. I got to meet Amanda at the Spark Christian Podcast Conference, and it was so much fun. She is actually the first person who has ever come up to me and like recognized me and said,
"Oh, it's so cool."
She said, "Are you Esther Littlefield from the Christian Woman Leadership Podcast?" And we had such a great conversation. And she told me about how she had found the podcast and also shared some of her story. And I'm also excited to share that she is going to be an upcoming guest, and you'll get to hear some of her story on the episode when she joins us.
Oh, that's so cool. We'll get to meet Amanda a little bit more than just that clip. So,
yeah.
And Amanda, I want to say I'm so glad that we've been able to be a blessing in your life, and we really appreciate hearing from you. So thank you very much. Okay, our next clip comes from Marion.
Hi. I'm Marion Syverson, and I am host of the Money, Motivation, and Motherhood podcast. The Christian Woman Leadership Podcast is a blessing. I'm not able to say just one episode because what has been left in my heart is the feeling of thanks to God for all the wisdom that He has given His women leaders. Because every single person, including, of course, Esther and Holly, they are speaking from they're being transparent. They are trying to tell you who they are through the mistakes that they've made, through the joys and the victories that they've had. They are making themselves available to us through the trials of their lives and then telling us the lessons that they've learned. And it blesses us because now we hopefully will be wiser and maybe not make those same mistakes in our lives. But I just feel like I'm surrounded, that I'm working in the field with a whole bunch of laborers who are equally full of integrity, who are equally on fire for Jesus, who are wholehearted.
Oh, Marion, we love you. You have been such a faithful supporter of our podcast right from the beginning. And I'm so happy that our vulnerability has been touching to you. We love you, Marion.
Yeah. If there's one word that I could use to describe Marion, it would be cheerleader.
Oh, definitely.
She is just like the biggest cheerleader for people and is always finding ways to encourage and support. So we are so grateful to have her on our team and be one of our cheerleaders. Mm-hmm. All right. Next, we have a clip from Gena.
This is Gena McCown, author of Women's Ministry with Purpose. And I just want to say congratulations and thank you to Esther and Holly for such an amazing podcast. I love the Christian Women's Leadership Podcast. I think it fills a void and provides a voice to those of us who are leading in the trenches as women in ministry leadership, whether it's the church, the community, or even in our homes. So thank you guys so much for what you're doing. Keep up the good work and God bless.
Thank you, Gena. We love having you as part of our community, and we also love what you're doing through your ministry as well down in Florida. And I'm just super excited to continue to partner with you in the future.
Thank you so much, Gena. I'm so excited to get to know you even better than we have already gotten to know you in our Facebook group. I'm so excited for you to join us someday as a guest on our podcast. And thank you so much for what you've said. Okay, our next clip is from Cyndee.
I'm Cyndee Ownbey, the founder of Women's Ministry Toolbox. I don't listen to many podcasts, but the Christian Woman Leadership Podcast is on my must-listen-to list. Their series on communication is a resource I know I'll return to again and again. Holly and Esther have a gift for asking questions on topics that encourage and equip me as a leader, and it feels as if we're all gathered together around the table, coffee cups in hand. Congratulations on 100 episodes, ladies. I look forward to listening to the next 100.
Oh, Cyndee, thank you. I loved chatting with you during your episode, and I agree with you. It does feel like we're sitting around a table, and that's exactly what we feel about you guys. We're just friends that we haven't met yet, and that's really kind of the culture that we hope to have here. It's just where we're sitting around and chatting about things. So I'm really glad that that's conveyed to you.
Yeah, and it was so fun to hear that we're on your must-listen list. I know that there are so many podcasts that you all can choose from to listen to, and we are always honored when you put us in that must-listen category. All right, so next we have Janell.
Hi, this is Janell Wood with the Finding Something Real podcast. Hey, I just want to thank you, Esther and Holly, for the Christian Women Leadership Podcast. I have to be honest and say that I haven't always considered myself a leader and sometimes have shied away from that title. I remember pausing before following your podcast because even though I host a podcast and I'm a writer, I wondered if that really qualified me to be one of your listeners. And your podcast has been so empowering to me. It's been a great push for me to not only believe that God made me with certain gifts and abilities, a great reminder, but also a practical help to just go do what I've been designed to do with the abilities that God has given me. So your message of embracing my God-given identity to lead with confidence has been a encouragement to me. The episodes I've listened to have equipped me, whether it's been a topic like how to approach having hard conversations or how to simplify strategic planning, or even honestly wrestling with doubt or disagreements. The podcasts have been super practical. And I feel like your podcast is a valuable resource for me as well as any woman who is wanting to make a Christ-centered impact on this world. So I just wanted to say thank you and congratulations on your 100th episode.
Thank you, Janell. I love what you shared, and I'm so glad that you went ahead and clicked play, even though you weren't sure that you kind of qualified as a leader or as a listener of the podcast. And it was really inspiring to hear how the podcast has continued to encourage you over the time that you've listened.
Yeah, Janelle, I'm so glad that we've been able to encourage you. And I'm so glad that you pushed forward and listened anyway, even though you weren't sure. And I hope it's been rewarding for you. So, okay, our next clip is from Tabitha.
My name is Tabitha Bigbee. I am the founder of the Everyday Faith Ministry. I'm a listener of the Christian Woman Leadership Podcast, and I was a guest, which was such a huge honor. Esther and Holly have created a platform where women are encouraged to embrace, be bold in, and grow in who God created them to be, which, no matter what that is our ministry. And we are empowered by the Holy Spirit to do equal and greater things that Jesus did, according to John 14:12. But that is not going to happen by just sitting back and hoping. So I say cheers, thank you, and blessings on Esther and Holly for obediently and determinedly acting on that dream that God put in them to create Christian Women Leadership Podcast. Congratulations. You guys are awesome.
Thank you so much, Tab. You're my high school buddy. I can't even believe how far we've come from those crazy high school days. And thank you so much for your encouragement. And I just have to say to our listeners, if you haven't checked out Everyday Faith, it is definitely a must follow on Instagram. And Tabitha is exactly as you see her. She is just absolutely that sweet in real life. So we love you, Tab.
Yeah. And I have to say, Holly and I were chatting at the beginning, like joking around about who our favorite and least favorite guests have been, which we said we can't choose. Like that's not even fair. No, we don't do that. But I will say that the conversation that we had with Tabitha on the podcast, which we'll link in the show notes, was just really powerful. And I love her passion to encourage women to be in God's word. And that's, like you said, that Instagram channel is all about that. So be sure to check that out. Okay, next we have Kim.
Hi, I'm Kim Wahl, and I'm the author of The Complaining Cure, and I would love to connect with you at onestepcloser.life. Listen, I love the Christian Women's Leadership Podcast, and I think it is so impactful because Esther is not afraid to dig into the tough topics that we all hate to deal with. I particularly liked the episode with Kelsey Schmidt and the topic of simplifying. Letting go of things can be so hard and painful. So I really appreciated the encouragement to look at everything and decide what's the most important and the encouragement to push through. I would encourage any woman who is in a leadership position to tap into the resources that Esther offers. I know her tools will sharpen your leadership skills.
Thank you, Kim, for sharing that. And you are right. We definitely don't shy away from the tough topics here on the show. So
we're not afraid.
No.
Kim, I'm so glad that Kelsey's episode was encouraging to you. We have been so lucky to have some amazing guests, and Kelsey's episode about simplifying and decluttering was really encouraging. So thank you so much for what you had to say about that. Okay, we're going to hear from Madge now.
Greetings, Esther and Holly. 100 episodes of a podcast is no mean feat. I should know because I've just relaunched the Healthy Church Growth Show podcast. Keep inspiring us because it's sorely needed. I also want to thank you for featuring me on episode 95 of the podcast. It was such an honor. God bless you from your friend across the pond, Madge Obaseki.
Thank you, Madge. And I am so glad the podcast has been inspiring you. And I could definitely listen to your accent all day long.
We love chatting with you, Madge. And honestly, I loved hearing your wisdom and your voice on the topic of discipleship. I know Esther said she could listen to your accent all day, but I think both of us could have talked to you all day long about discipleship. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with our listeners. And next, we are going to hear from Kristen Joy.
Hey, Kristen Joy here from the Ministry Wife Coach. I love listening to the Christian Women Leadership Podcast because Esther and Holly bring such biblical worldview to infuse all of their leadership conversations. They are grounded in the truths of who we are in Christ and how being a Christian leader makes a difference day in and day out in how we will lead, no matter what specific realm of leadership we lead in. One of my favorite recent episodes was episode 87 about simple self-care. I'm passionate about whole person health, and I was so thankful for Esther's permission that she gave us to include this care in our daily and weekly routine. This topic can often turn selfish, and I thought Esther did a fantastic job explaining why nurturing our souls is important in God's economy. Thank you guys for all you do. You are bringing really important conversations to the table, and I'm learning to think more deeply about them because of your work and guests. Congrats on your 100th episode.
Okay, Kristen, thanks so much. I am so glad to have you as part of our community. You have been such an encouragement to me. You have sent messages and, just like little bits of encouragement whenever an episode impacts you. And that, if you have ever been a podcaster or you've ever written anything or just any kind of leadership role at all, really, you know how much those little messages of encouragement can make such a big impact. And I know that it's been just so powerful to receive those from Kristen.
Yeah, Kristen, thanks so much. Honestly, I totally agree with you. Esther did a fantastic job on that episode, and you're so right. So thank you for saying it. Okay, so next is Elizabeth.
Hi, Holly. Hi, Esther. Congratulations on your 100th episode. I just wanted to thank you so much for providing this podcast. It came along at just the right time for me. I have never really considered myself a leader, but I realized in my own family, I have 3 teenage daughters, and right around the time the podcast started, I realized that I really needed to step into my leadership role in our family, that they were looking for guidance. And if I didn't provide it, they were going to look elsewhere. And I love all the conversations. I love the things they've shared. And I think the biggest impact it's had on me is giving me that confidence, or pointing me in the direction that the confidence doesn't need to come from me. So I don't need to feel confident. I can be confident in the role that God has placed me here for, to be the leader that they need me to be. And so thank you so much for sharing so generously of your time and your stories and your heart. And I'm enjoying listening.
Oh, Elizabeth, you are most definitely a leader. And thank you for being a friend of the podcast. We so appreciate you. I've gotten to know Elizabeth a little bit, and she is very, very sweet. So
she is one of the sweetest people I know. And I actually have gotten to meet Elizabeth in person.
Ooh,
and
cool.
It was really fun. I remember sitting down. It was at an event in California, and we were actually out on a cruise in the bay.
Ooh,
and
that sounds fancy.
It was fancy. We were all dressed up. It was super fun. But we just had such a great conversation and kind of connected, and we've stayed connected since then. So I am just so grateful to have people like Elizabeth and the rest of you. And I know a lot of you, maybe you thought, oh, I'll send in a clip, and then you kind of forgot, or that happens. We know that happens and life happens. Okay, friends, I am popping in here for a quick minute because we actually had a few more people send in their clips after Holly and I recorded. So I wanted to still include them in this episode. So let's go ahead and take a listen to a message from Lisa.
Hey, this is Lisa Bynoe-Stevens, and I am a local therapist and counselor. I'm also a wedding officiant. I also officiate funerals and baby ceremonies as well. I have been used a lot in women's ministry, and so I've also done like youth ministry and taught Sunday school for years, was a kids pastor recently. And so God's been really good to me, especially during COVID, because he's really been narrowing down my focus and also really speaking to me. And one of the ways he's used to speak to me was through the Christian Women's Leadership Podcast. And so I have been so thoroughly blessed to find this podcast. It's just been so timely. I came out of a really bad experience in terms of ministry, and this podcast has been used by God to really heal the bruised parts of me. And so I just want to say a huge thank you to all of you who are involved with this podcast. May the Lord continue to bless and keep you guys. I'm going to pray that he definitely will give back to you tenfold what you've given to me. And I will continue to be listening in and not only getting points to help me in my own ministry, but also to continue to allow God to heal me through every single word that you guys say. Thank you so much for your faithfulness and for your creativity and for just being you guys and being real. God bless you.
Lisa, we are so honored that the podcast has been part of your healing. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Now let's listen to a message from Kari.
Hi, this is Kari from Love Does That. There are so many things I appreciate about this podcast, but the one thing that is sticking out to me today is from episodes 83 and 84, where Tembi shares about her journey around the world and how God led her. And in that podcast, she said, only you know what God is calling you to do. And though we want our family and friends to understand and to support us in what he's calling us to do, they don't always get it. And so just trusting that he's leading us is a really important point that I appreciate.
Kari, I loved that you shared that key takeaway from the episodes with Tembi. That was such a powerful series of episodes. And we are also so grateful to have you as part of our group and our podcast community. Now let's wrap up with one more from Laurie.
Congratulations, Esther and Holly, on your 100th podcast episode. Because I know you both and have watched you in ministry, I can say you're fantastic in serving and in learning, growing, and sharing. You love the local church, and you're passionate about Jesus and the kingdom of God. The Christian Woman Leadership Podcast fills a void in the Christian world. I remember talking about the Vacuum in Leadership podcasts and materials specifically for women in ministry, not just women's ministry, but just plain ministry. Your podcast is a great source for meeting real needs and answering questions for women in ministry and business. Every single episode, I've left with something of value to use in my life and ministry. You're authentic, you're honest, you're fair, you're kind, and you're really funny. I love listening to you both laugh. You share what you've learned yourself and have guests to help us all grow. You've touched on personalities, theology, organization, business, all with a solid biblical foundation and true love for your sisters in Christ. Keep it up. We all need you.
Laurie is another one of those people in my life who never fails to encourage me, and you can tell that she is such an encourager at heart. She also happens to be my pastor's wife, and I am very grateful to have a leader like her in my own life. And I'm also so honored that she has actually listened to every single episode of the Christian Woman Leadership Podcast. We love you, Laurie, and thank you for all your support. We just want to thank you all for being part of our community. And it was really fun to kind of hear these different clips from people. Obviously, nobody knew what anyone else was going to say. And we had no idea what you would say either when we asked you. So we were like, well,
we'll see what happens.
Yeah. But I think that the messages that we heard throughout this conversation really affirm that we have kind of stayed true to our original intention from the beginning of the podcast.
Yeah.
And so I was wondering, Holly, if you want to read what we have had on the website about the podcast and kind of what we wanted to accomplish from the very beginning.
Yeah. So we discuss issues related to leading as a Christian woman, and we also interview other women who share their leadership journeys. Through the podcast, we offer encouragement, tools, and resources to help you live out your unique calling as a leader and lead with confidence. And honestly, I think that has really been a guiding principle for us. All these things have been guiding principles as we sort of go forward and as we think about topics that we want to cover and how we want to cover them. We really want to give you everything that you need to lead with confidence.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
I feel like just the way that God has used the podcast, it's been fun to hear all these messages from those of you who are listeners, but at the same time, I feel like I have been so blessed personally just to be able to do this, because being able to have these conversations and interview other women, it's just been so powerful. Like it's been really, really encouraging to me personally. And so I am just really grateful for God allowing us to do this and for him bringing the people that we knew. Some of the guests that we've had are people that I have met in person. Like I would have probably never actually heard of them if it weren't for just God arranging the time and the place for us to connect. And then others of you have joined our Facebook group and somehow we've gotten connected that way. So, God can use things that we never anticipated to kind of bring us together. But we're just, I don't know. I just wanted to share that, how grateful I am for all of that.
No, and I'm glad you said that, because as you were talking, I was kind of thinking about how God has orchestrated so many things. And like, it's so good to be able to have this conversation, because I don't know that our guests sort of understand on the back end how he has, like, even just from how he's prepared each of us when we're thinking and talking about a specific topic, we'll come together and say, well, this is what I was thinking about. This is kind of how I was mulling it over, or this is what I read, or whatever. And the other person will totally affirm that. And it's like God has just kind of brought us together on the topic. And, you know, we do think very similarly, but I think we come at it with very different perspectives. And so, I don't know, it's just really nice to see how God orchestrates everything from the episodes that we do together, as well as the episodes that we do with our guests. And along with that, like, he's allowing us to record these episodes, and hopefully they're a blessing to others. But I found that even as we have interviewed guests, the things that they've said and the things that they've been able to give wisdom and counsel on have been helpful in things that I've been going through in my own life. And so it's been, I don't know, it's been a very growing season, and a very, a tool that's really cultivated me as well. So I'm very thankful for it from that standpoint.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many times I have teared up as a guest has shared something. And like you said, sometimes I know that thing that they're saying is for me. Like it's a thing that God wanted me to hear that day. Even if the rest of the listeners, it means nothing to them, for whatever reason, he decided to use that person to speak into me. And we hope that you all have those similar moments, and it may be around a completely different phrase, or something may hit each of us differently. But I think God has used the guests, in so many different ways. And the other thing that you said, like, that we come at things from a different perspective, I'm just super grateful that, like, you said yes to being my co-host. And I've thought a few times about, yes, there have been times where I do an interview alone, and there's been a couple times where you've done that as well. But when we do it together, we kind of like sort of prepare a little bit. Well, we prepare a lot. I'll say that, but we don't like script out every single moment of the podcast. We want it to be a conversation. And sometimes the questions you will ask will be like things that I would never think to ask. And so it's just super fun to see, again, how God has used each of us and our different unique giftings, really, in how we've been able to pull different things out of our guests, that if it were just always one of us or the other, we might not get that same kind of mixture of conversation.
Yeah. So, and I think, obviously I'm very thankful that you even asked me, but I think one of the things that sort of makes this go and fly, obviously, other than the fact that I really feel like God is in it, is the fact that he's been able to cultivate our friendship over, I think the last time I counted was something like 10 years.
Yeah.
And, that is a gift from him. And I'm so glad that, and I'll say this specifically to you, but like, however long ago it was now, 8 years ago, you started that Bible study, and it just really, for the time being that it was a huge catalyst in so many people's lives. And it's grown locally, but then you and I have been able, I feel like, to bring that online and been able to grow that internationally. And so I'm so thankful that you were obedient and that you stepped out and laid a really good foundation for this type of culture where we can talk about these things, that we can have these types of discussions within friendship and be supportive to each other. And then we've been able to bring other people into that circle. I hope that makes sense. But I just am so thankful for what God has done. And, it all started with your step of obedience and just trusting him on what he called you to do and what he asked you to do. And I'm just, as I sit back, 8 years ago now, I'm just blown away by all of the things. And I know it's not just that one Bible study, but, a lot of it is you being the catalyst and you really pushing people forward into their relationships with Jesus. So I just want to thank you, and we will try not to cry, but I really love you.
Well, and what I think kind of what you just shared there is that if I think back to that time, it was scary and it felt like a big deal at the time. Looking back, it's like, that wasn't a big deal, just starting a Bible study. Yeah. But I think for you who are listening, like sometimes your journey of leadership starts with saying yes to something that 10 years later may look like no big deal. But at the moment that God is asking you to do it, it may feel like a really big, scary thing. Yeah. And the key is, and what I hope to continue to do is to be obedient to what he's calling me to do, regardless of how I feel about it, regardless of if it makes me scared or if it might look weird to other people, or it might just seem like that's kind of a crazy idea. Why would you do that? That is sometimes what leadership looks like, is doing those things, even regardless of what other people or what you yourself feel. Yeah. And then the other side of what I wanted to mention from what you shared was just this sense of like you and I just having a conversation. And I think when we have our guest interviews, most of the time we try to have it be like a real authentic conversation. Yes, we might have some things planned out that we want to hit on, but way back in the Bible study time, like we had a lot of very real, very raw conversations, and we talked about hard topics. And that is part of what we wanted to bring into this podcast is the willingness to be vulnerable, the willingness to open up and be real, and, not portray some sort of perfect persona, which neither of us could do anyway, but, just like, and that's kind of some of what we've heard from you guys, like, not in these clips necessarily, but just other feedback that we've gotten, or even on our reviews. Like if you read our podcast reviews, several of them refer to the idea that they love that it feels like they're sitting down for a cup of coffee with friends, or the willingness to just be open about topics that sometimes get skirted over in the church. So,
and I think when I think back to that first time, like we were such a hot mess. All of us were such a hot mess. And so it was just, like I said, I keep using the word catalyst, but it was a catalyst for such transformation in every single person's life that was part of that group. And I think that it's important. Like we're very lucky to be able to translate that into this podcast, but sometimes that doesn't happen. And sometimes it doesn't move on to bigger platforms, but just that step of obedience was totally worth it for the transformation that each one of us has seen in our lives. And not saying that we're not all still hot messes, but God has worked some amazing miracles when I think back on where each of those people were in that situation and where they've come to now. And all it took was a step of obedience. And we all needed to do our own work with God, but sometimes we just need someone to invite us in and say, I'm doing this. Let's do it together. It's hard work, but let's do it together and let's support each other. So we hope that through this podcast, we are giving you that invitation. This is hard work. Let's do it together. And you're part of the conversation right along with us when we're talking to guests or when we're talking to each other. So,
yeah, I love that. Okay. So we celebrated now for our fun and exciting announcement.
Yeah.
Okay. So this could be the best idea or potentially the worst idea we've ever had. But do you want to tell them? Do you want to tell them? Okay.
Sure. I'll tell them. So you guys, we're going to have merch. Merchandise. We're going to have merchandise. We're going to figure out what the actual website is for you to go to, and it will be linked into the show notes, but we just want you to be able to wear your confidence, whether it's in a hat or a t-shirt or whatever that looks like. And so if you truly are a fangirl, which it's weird for me to say that out loud,
there may be just two of you out there.
There may be two of you out there, but we would love for you to wear some of our swag, our merch, and when someone asks you about what you have or what you're wearing, you can say, I got it from here. And it's because of the Christian Women Leadership Podcast. And this is what it's meant to me. So,
Yeah. So like I said, we're gonna put it out there. We are giving ourselves a deadline because actually, like as we're recording this, nothing is set up yet. So this is one of those steps of faith where we're saying we're gonna do it.
But we've been talking about this for a long time. And I think both of us have had lots of ideas about this. So
gosh.
I really don't think that it will be difficult.
No.
And we have to make pretty things.
We want to give you stuff that you would actually want to wear or like use, like practical things, but fun stuff too. So again,
exactly.
We're not making any promises, but we're hoping that you're going to love it.
Yeah.
And if you're part of the Purposeful Leadership Facebook group, we're going to want to see your swag once you get it and stuff.
Oh,
so
absolutely.
we're going to need to see some pics and all kinds of stuff.
Maybe we could come up with a hashtag at some point.
Okay.
And if you share it on social media, you should put our hashtag.
Yeah. We need a hashtag.
I feel like that is if you do this, then we'll do that. But I don't know what that is right now. If you share your picture with the hashtag, we will be very happy and thankful.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Oh my word. Okay. So we're gonna do our normal thing, even though not the whole, but like a lot of our conversation has been fun and celebratory because that's the whole point of this episode.
Exactly.
Okay. But we're gonna end with a question. Okay.
Okay.
And it is, what has been the most awkward moment of the podcast to date for you? Okay.
Every single end of every single podcast has been awkward. Have you guys noticed it? Just let us know. Have you noticed that it's super duper awkward at the very end? I never know what to say at the end because if I say like, bye, that seems weird. Like we're ending a phone conversation. Or if I'm like, see you later. Like that also feels weird. So I never know what to say at the end. And I think that we may have had this discussion on another podcast episode. I don't know.
We might have.
But
who knows?
I need what is it called? A tagline, an outro?
Yeah, we need you guys to send in,
tell
us what
phrase.
Holly should say at the end. Because you don't want to just repeat what I just said. So that's why I think you're getting stuck is I usually am like closing it out. Like,
yes, you are.
The guest for being here. And then the guest will say something afterwards.
Yeah.
And then Holly's like, and there's like this moment where it's like
awkward
she wants to say something. She doesn't know what to say.
If you listen really closely, sometimes at the very end of the episode, if you literally listen to the last second, you'll hear me go, bye. And it's super weird.
And sometimes I tell our editor just to cut it off after the guest.
Oh, yeah.
So that it just doesn't sound weird.
So sometimes I don't even say anything, but it's because I've left an awkward pause and then I say something super awkward.
Yeah.
So that's why. Help a girl out.
Yeah.
Help a girl out.
We
So,
need
okay.
help.
What about you? What is your awkward moment from the podcast?
I was trying to think of, I can't think of like a specific moment.
Okay.
That's like, this was horrible, but probably the ongoing, it's like there's like an ongoing awkwardness where every once in a while, the guest will have like an audio issue. And
yes,
if you know anything about me, which Holly does, I have very sensitive ears and I pick up on any little weird audio sounds.
You have superhuman hearing, just so you know.
Okay. Well, yeah. Okay. So I want you guys as the listeners to like be able to hear the guest really well and not have any disruptions or things. And so every once in a while, the guest will have like those Apple earbuds with the microphone that's halfway down, like by your mouth, but it will be resting against their coat collar or their hair. And those things are so sensitive that any little movement picks up like, and as a listener of many podcasts, it drives me batty to hear that the whole time. And so I have to like find a way to gently try to like interject at a moment when they're not like saying something super heavy or whatever, and have to be like, can you move your earbuds? Because they're kind of making a noise, because if you're the one that's doing, it's doing it on your end, you don't hear it.
Yeah.
It's only the other person that hears it.
Right.
So probably those would be kind of like the awkward moments where I have to try to find a way to nicely say the sound is a problem. You know?
Well, so obviously our listeners don't hear this because we cut this part out.
Yeah.
And you're never mean. You're never hey, dummy, you're making weird noises. So when you say like you need to find a nice way to say it, you always say it super nice. But yes, it does feel awkward because inevitably when they're saying something super like moving, super spiritual, like God is really speaking through them. And then Esther's like, I'm going to pause here for a minute. You're kind of making a little bit of noise with your mic.
Yes. Or okay, this one is a little bit worse. The hand talkers.
Oh, that's me.
And then it's like, can you hear that?
Are you actually going to leave that in?
I'm going to leave that in so people can know what it's like.
That's
so, you know, like hand talkers, if they're bouncing their hands around, and especially if their mic is sitting on a desk and they like are banging on the desk.
Yeah.
Again, it's like a normal thing for people to do. I am a major hand talker.
Oh yeah.
But I've just learned how to hand talk without hitting my mic. but you know, it's just a thing that happens. So that one is harder because it's like, then I have to address like, so you're moving your hands a lot and it's also hitting the mic and it's making a sound. So again, these are the awkward things that go on behind the scenes that you don't have to experience as the listener. Although I will say there are times when it just doesn't, like we can't cut things out. Like there are certain things where there's going to be bumps. There's going to be always, you know, not always the best audio. And that's just how things are. Because guess what? I'm not buying a mic and sending it to each of my guests.
Yeah.
We're not at that level yet, ladies. Until all y'all start supporting the podcast by being a podcast partner, we're not at that level.
We would quickly run out of our own funds.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we wrap up, what am I going to say at the very end after you're done talking?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Wait, you mean like your closing tagline right now?
Yeah, because you're going to wrap up right now.
Oh.
And I don't have anything to say.
So this isn't part of the episode.
Yeah. No, this is part of the episode. We have moved past all of the documented words on the paper. We're in white space now, and you're going to wrap up, and I have nothing to say at the end.
Thank you for being part of our 100 episodes.
Okay, I'm going to say that now, and then you wrap up. Okay. Thank you for being a part of our 100 episodes. We really appreciate you and we love you.
Yes, we are super grateful that you have been with us, whether you've been with us since episode 1 or you just started listening in, you know, the past couple weeks. We're glad you're here. We hope you go back and listen to almost all the back episodes. I say almost all because the very beginning, I can't really guarantee that the audio sounds great or that we don't sound like we're just reading a script, but the content is still good.
We were getting our feet underneath of us.
We were.
Yeah.
So anyway, we're grateful for you. Thank you for being with us. And as one of our clips mentioned, hopefully here's to another 100 episodes. Hi, friend. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Christian Woman Leadership Podcast. We're so glad you took the time out of your day to listen, and I truly hope that it made an impact on your ability to lead well. If it did, would you consider sharing this episode with a friend? You could take a screenshot of the episode and share it on your social media, maybe an Instagram story or on Facebook, or you could just text the link to a friend. We would truly appreciate that, as when you share with a friend, it helps spread the word about the podcast and it helps more women to be able to be impacted so that they can lead and love others well. Now, don't forget, your leadership matters, and it's time for you to embrace your gifts and lead with confidence.